Saturday night live contemplations. So interesting. So hi, blessings, beloved. Welcome. Let's see. So it's a little loud over at my place. I hear all these motorcycles that are just driving by like crazy. And so forgive me if you hear the loud motorcycles. It is quite obnoxious, not gonna lie. So welcome. Hi, I'm so it's so funny because like I love so things that we get so uncomfortable talking about, right? Like trauma, and like what does that mean? And people like really are, veer away from Matt. I have not seen you in forever. I hope all has been well for you, Matt. Things that people tend to shy away from, or get uncomfortable talking about, those are typically the things. Hi. Those are typically the things that I go towards, and anything that's taboo and people are awkward or uncomfortable talking about, I generally am pretty comfortable talking about. And that's exactly why I do what I do, because I go to those dark spaces that people are generally afraid to go to. So I feel the more that we talk about things that are uncomfortable to you, the more we integrate them into just a regular conversation, because really that's kind of what needs to happen for things to not create such a stigma around, or not to have such a judgment around some uncomfortable topics. So I just bring that stuff to illuminate for all of us. Yes. So interesting. So this, everything that I talk about live and on here is it's all connected. It's all connected. All the topics are connected and they overlap on top of each other. And, they also are very connected as to what I feel my soul purpose and mission is in this lifetime, which is, helping to guide people to their authentic self and uncover their truth. Also empowering people to start thinking and making choices based on their heart center, and hence why my business is called Heart Activation, because until we learn how to connect to our heart space, those difficult things that are connected to our hurts, we make choices from an egoic mind, which is, our ego is set to protect us. So with all that being said, I know a lot of times in the spiritual community and in the recovery community, it's in my world, it is very prevalent, trauma and inner child work and shadow work, and what does that mean exactly, and trauma. That word is used so much. Like, what does that actually mean? And I think it's a really great question, because a lot of people just think that it's something that people don't want to feel, and so they suppress it. And honestly, it's actually how trauma happens, and we can look at it in different ways. So like trauma in the spiritual realm is like we call soul fragments, or a wounded sense of self. So every time that so it's like Trauma happens when when your emotional body, right? So you have such an overwhelming sense of emotions, and it doesn't have to be a horrific event to be emotional, like emotionally overwhelming. It could be even just a move at at a very supple time in your life that creates a feeling of unsafety and a feeling of being unstable and not protected. And so when our emotional body becomes so overwhelmed, it disconnects from our physical body, and it doesn't make the connection in our brain to process the events that are happening into our emotional body. And so our physical body just stores the trauma in it, in our cellular memory. And because our cells have memory, even from generations, we carry the DNA within our cells. And so cellular memory is a real thing. Like, even though you may not remember what happened, it still is held within your cells, because if you have a heightened emotional state that your body and brain was not able to actually connect the pieces together and actually able to process things, there's a disconnect there. So the disconnect is where the trauma happens, because people who have a very traumatic or very heightened emotional event happen, they might not seem like something big just happened. They might just move on about their life and act like nothing has happened. And so people just tend to assume that these events didn't actually change them, or that these events didn't really affect them in any way, until you get into later on in life and you're trying to build relationships, you're trying to build marriages and have kids. Like, for me, when I started having children is when my traumas really came to the forefront, and everything that I thought was normal turns out was not normal whatsoever. So it's fascinating, because it's like, once you have gone years without anything happening, related to this trauma, it's like, well, you start trying to build upon things, and you start trying to build, and you're not able to maintain relationships, or you think that the world is out to get you, and things are always gonna fall against you, and that you can't keep a job, or you start to put on a lot of weight, and you're not able to regulate your emotions, and you get afraid of people, or you get to be uncomfortable in big groups of people. I mean, they're really very it's like it doesn't seem like the one event or one symptom of trauma, it's like it starts building on top of each other. And I've often said that unresolved trauma is like a rubber band ball, because it's like you have this core event that happens, and that starts building how you cope with life in general, in a lens through of protecting yourself. So you're going through life in a fight or flight mode without even knowing that. And that's where the ego comes in, is because the ego is there. It thinks it's helping to protect you. And so we make choices a lot from our emotional. Oh, look at our lights went out. Oh, that's because it died. So we're going to leave it. Hold on. Yeah. All right. Whatever. Actually, I can't handle that. So hang on a second. Gosh, what a greasy face. Just Well, I'm half kidding. Anyways, so, now where was I? Oh, it's like a rubber band. We're working through life on like a fight or flight mode, and it's really, you're not aware of it until the rubber band ball gets to be like outrageously, I can't stand looking at myself in this. Sorry, not sorry, because it's like I'm looking at myself, so I have to be able to at least stand looking at myself in here. Okay, we're good. We're back on. We're golden. So all of these choices in life that you have made up until this point, and you haven't really thought that you've had trauma, or, you know, that these events have not hurt you or affected you in a way that you think you need to deal with it, then your life kind of starts to become like shambles, and not even like all in a huge uproar. It's just slowly things start to not work how you feel they have in the past. And so that could come out as so many different things. I mean, addiction is one of them. You know, addiction is a huge way that people cope with trauma. And other things are, you know, isolating. Depression is a huge one. Overeating is another huge one. So it's, now we're at a point in our society where people are recognizing that what has worked in the past for like previous generations is no longer working. You know, like the previous generations, or, and like I have said in other lives, like that it's been like, you know, just pushing forward. You have to do what you need to get done because you have responsibilities and don't feel. And so we're now like, our mental health is suffering. Our livelihood is suffering. The way that we interact with each other has been disconnected for quite some time, and the way that we are connected to ourselves and to our heart and our emotions has not allowed us to be able to form these connections that actually help us to feel like we're thriving. And this brings about like maybe you're not like depressed, but you're certainly not loving life. Or maybe you're just like ho-humming through, you're just going through the motions. You're going through the motions because that's just what you have to do. You thought you wanted this job, you thought you wanted this family, and now you have it all, and it's like you're not happy. So you feel kind of like, well, what's wrong with me? And nothing is wrong with you. Oh, hi, Sophie. So thank you for all the love. It is just that we were never taught how to actually, we were never taught like, oh, how trauma is, you know. And if you really want to, if you are like me and you enjoy learning about psychology and how people handle things, it's a disturbing, it can be a disturbing documentary, but Leaving Neverland is, I think for many has been an eye-opening thing. I mean, and it's not even about like Michael Jackson, like it really, I mean it is, but it's not. I think I love how the guys came out later on in life, because their whole childhood and the way that these boys moved forward in life, they didn't think anything was wrong with them until it was until they started having kids, and they were like, oh my God, like they couldn't keep a job, they couldn't like be a parent, they couldn't be a partner, and this is where they started to learn that what had happened in their childhood had actually severely affected the way that they had done their life. And I think that it's beautiful for people to see, because people, our society in general, think, well, why would anybody come on years later and say that they were traumatized as a child? Because you don't know until you know. And especially at such a young age like that, it's it's very different at like such a young age. So these people, and just like life, you shut down your emotions. You just keep going forward. Your emotional body completely disconnects from your physical body, and it stores, your physical body stores this trauma in your cellular memory until it comes up, until it boils, until it surfaces, until you can't stay that disconnected. And so the work with childhood integration is like when there's a point, like I said, when there's a heightened emotional conflict between your body and your emotions. And so there's this breaking point, right? So here is like your whole self, and this event happens, and then here is this part where like you start breaking off between your emotional and physical body, and then another trauma happens, and it becomes even bigger away from your center, and then another like event, and at the end of it, you're like completely disconnected from your whole self. And so childhood integration, we go through and we kind of bring these pieces back together, and connecting the way that we see our child, connecting and flipping the perspective and shifting the way that we perceive how the events happen, and nurturing and nourishing and loving this your little self, your little self, or not so little teenage self, or young adult self, or all of those things where we didn't allow or didn't know how to have our emotions come through, and it's like, it's a form of protection. It is when people become emotionally disconnected, it is because you're not. You would be in sensory overload if your body took on, if your emotional state took on everything that was happening, like you wouldn't be able to function. So really, it's like it's a safety mechanism that your body does for you. So this is also why there's a lot of sickness and but like this is where a lot of the sickness comes. It's because most of us do live in a fight or flight mode, and that brings so much stress into our lives. Like if we're constantly on the lookout for things that are happening to us, and we feel like we have to constantly protect ourselves, like that's very exhausting. Existing versus living, self-care goes out the window. Oh my God, totally. That is I love that you said that. Like I got chills, because that's so true. When you are existing versus living, self-care goes out the window. Like when you're in that mode, like, do we even know how to self-care? Because it is more like, like what does that even look like? And then we're probably like made to feel like we're selfish for taking care of ourselves. I think it's incredibly important to take care and be kind and compassionate to ourselves along this journey, and to also recognize that like trauma or fragmented pieces of some self and wounded parts of self, however you want to phrase it, it is not like something big can happen to one person and it could affect them greatly, and the same thing could happen to the other person and it wouldn't affect them the same way. Or something considered to be small, like a move, would greatly impact somebody, and then it doesn't impact this other person at all. So it is not the same. Again, this all goes to like our journey is our own journey, and we cannot determine how other people handle their emotions or their life, or what is or isn't trauma for another person. Like, who is even to say that? First of all, if you feel a certain way, your feelings are valid, point blank. And there's other ways to, like, there's other ways to shift. There's other ways to shift the narrative, because you are not your feelings. However, your feelings are valid. So it's all just like, this could be really, and how did this even come about? Well, I don't know, honestly, like, I mean, I do know this is what I do. I talk about trauma all the time. Like, which is beautiful, because I honestly, like, until it becomes part of a consistent communication, people are afraid to talk about it, and therefore persist and continue in that cycle. And so breaking down the stigma and breaking down the judgments around how trauma should be talked about often is really what is going to help our mental health in such a great way. So, well, great. I don't know if that's the right word, but I'm going with it. So, so that's why I'm here talking about this all on a Saturday night. But it is, because it's like part of all of humanity healing. I see this in such a big way for all of us, and the connection that can happen when people are open about their hurts, and so somebody kind of has to take the lead with that. And I guess that's me, so, and I'm really okay with that, because I'm really empowered by all of the things that have happened for me, and everybody else absolutely can be in that same space. It is our pain to a purpose, and like, I've turned my pain into a passion. So, it is not left in vain, for sure. And so with that, I will plug in myself here and say that I do month-long one-on-one, like, mentorship programs, and that we work with this specifically, in our childhood healing and integrating these fragmented pieces of self, to really just start to be able to tap into our truth and start empowering our choices from our truth. So you can message me if you are curious about the month-long mentorship, and yeah, any questions or anything, you can reach out to me. And I love you all so much, and I appreciate you joining me on a Saturday night. I hope you are enjoying this lovely evening, and I will be back soon. Sending so much love.